In this vlog, I'm going to give you an idea that I believe can help you cope with whatever 2021 brings us. It'll teach you how to cope in such difficult, complex situations, and it's something that might surprise you. Hi, my name's Scott McArthur and thank you for tuning in to the Edge of Next vlog, where I give you tools, techniques and mental models to help you work towards the future of work. My ultimate aim is to put the human back in human resources. If this is the first time that you've visited the Edge of Next vlog, please hit the subscribe button and hit the little bell, and that'll make sure you're part of the future conversation. You can probably see that I'm back in the forest. It's the first time I've been here for best part of 4 or 5 months, and for those of you who follow me regularly, you know I've now got my own studio at home where I do most of my videos. But I thought today I'd come back, and it seems the snow has joined me, so it's cold but it's lovely. It's one of those classic New Year's Day type days where the sun isn't quite shining, but it's lovely, and it makes you feel good to be alive. And that's kind of the theme for today's piece, because as with many people, I've been reflecting on the year that's gone and what a year it's been, and I'm not going to repeat all the sort of trite statements that are all over the media at the moment, but I think, how have we done? Well, if 9 months ago you'd said to me that I would have made 20% of my predicted revenue for the year, if you'd said I had only done 7 speeches in the whole year, if you'd said that I was now getting pretty good at being a film editor, I'd made over 100 videos, and I was focusing on my online community, having set up my own Facebook group, having set up my own YouTube channel, having set up my own live broadcast schedule, I would have said you were a bit of an idiot. I mean, I'd never heard of Restream, I'd never heard of Twitch. I'd only just about set up a YouTube channel 12 months ago, and now I've done over 100 videos, and I've started to take bookings, which is the thing that is giving me the smile on my face, because although I've enjoyed learning how to become a filmmaker, and I've enjoyed how the things I've learned in terms of YouTube, and I've met new people, got some new friends, I've interviewed people as famous as Robert Zubrin, the famous Mars scientist, through to people who are magicians and comedians and writers and and people who are just wonderful. It has been incredible. Other people have said, how have you kept it together? Well, if I'm absolutely honest, I haven't. I had a good couple of weeks where I went off the rails. I couldn't quite cope with the fact I was losing so much revenue. I guess that's linked to how I create meaning in my own life, and it's how I help other people, which I'm so passionate about, and I found I just couldn't do it anymore. So that was difficult, I have to be honest. But since then, and I had this moment in my local pub called the Bear, I was sitting there and I'd probably had my 7th pint of Guinness and I thought, no, I can't continue like this. I've got to rely on my, what I've already got to get me through this. And this is where the lesson for today comes from, and it's something that I've said for years, and I don't think I've quite even myself understood how important it is. And that is this: when I'm helping people with speaking, or helping coach people who have got a big speech or a big presentation to do, I often say to them, once they've written their speech, they've prepared the materials and they're creatives, I say, right, now the next step is to practice until you can ad-lib. You see, what I mean by this is that I think that a lot of what we do, a lot of the skills that we develop, we often think of them in a narrow sense. I'll use that skill to do this, I'll use that skill to do that. But see, I think differently about it, and in the context of a presentation, which I'll stick to for now, I say to people, okay, if you practice your speech until you are so good at it that your nerves start to wash away, and at that point you can start to use your other skills. So if something happens when you're speaking, you can ad-lib, you can move towards another topic, you can move towards another story, you can basically improvise. And it's that word improvise that I want to get you to think about in today's vlog. Now, those of you who know me know that I'm not a big jazz fan. In fact, I can't stand most jazz, apart from Tom Waits and maybe a little bit of Sinatra sometimes. I'm not a fan. But what I do understand is how talented the musicians are. And those of you who follow jazz know that one of the things that jazz musicians do is they improvise. And it's the same for other types of music. I mean, I'm also a big prog rock fan, and prog rock musicians, the good ones, pride themselves in being able to improvise. And the good ones just don't go off and noodle. They actually go off and create beautiful ambient sounds based on the fact that they've got decades often of experience behind them. And it's that I think is part of the secret in coping with the environment that we currently live in. You see, the thing is that oftentimes we're born into a life, it's set out for us. It's something that, you know, you grow up, like I did. I grew up in industrial central Scotland. I was expected by everyone, my family, my school, myself, to follow my family. So become a person who worked in the steelworks, or joined the Navy, or got into fishing, or whatever. That was what was expected of me. And it wasn't until I had an experience with a absolutely terrible careers advisor that I realised I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something else. And what I learned at that stage was what makes me different, and I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about human beings, is learning. See, if you think about it, human beings are pretty unique in that sense, because if you're a fish, you learn how to be a fish, and then you're a fish. If you're a donkey, you learn how to be a donkey, then you're a donkey for the rest of your life. But human beings aren't the same as that. You can have a number of lives, and you can have a number of career paths, or loves, or passions, or hobbies, or pastimes, or focuses, depending on how you are with this thing called learning. And I think that's the key. I honestly think that the modern organisation, and I've said this once before, that our new pension is actually learning. Because let's face it, the financial environment is such that we're going to have to work longer, we're going to have to think smarter about how we develop as human beings and how we continue to make money into our much older age. And I can see most of us, certainly from my generation, working not into their 60s but into their 70s. And oftentimes that means that you have to change your career path, because maybe physically, mentally, whatever, you might not be able to do what you've always done. And therefore, we're going to have to rely on new skills, new capabilities to enable us to move into that future. Listening to an interview with an anthropologist called Mary Catherine Bateson the other day, and she said that for her, the art of life was in improvisation, was in being able to be flexible. And oh gosh, I love it. I so agree with Mary on this, that I think that living into your life as a predetermined structure, as I said earlier, many of us have, is not the way to cope with change. You're suddenly faced with a massive context change, a massive personal or health change. How do you do it? Because you can't cope, because you don't have the capabilities to do so. And that's why I'm such a fan of learning and development, and why I commit myself to many hours every week of learning things that I didn't know before, going out with my scope, if you like. And again, one of the subjects that I often talk about is something called cognitive diversity. And cognitive diversity is just about understanding that you can learn things from people who are not like you. You can learn things as much from a woodcutter as you can from a professor. There are things that you can learn from everyone, and those things make you improv ready. And that's where I would like to take you on this piece. Are you improv ready? So in 2021, my challenge for you is to start to think about what you can do to learn things that are not the same as what you would normally do. So, have you, for example, followed any poets? Have you thought about what you could learn from the poets? I believe that poetry is a great source of intellectual nourishment, particularly about what's called the inner work. And I love the fact that some poets say that even after they've written the poetry, they don't really understand what they've written. They have to riff intellectually off their own poems, and I think that's beautiful. It's the same with music. It doesn't matter what sort of music you like, but could you learn something from musicians? Could you, if you've got a favourite artist, get their biography, find out how they did it, how did they come up with the ideas, who did they meet, how did they interact with others in the community, how did they collaborate that enabled them to create their art. It doesn't matter if I like it, it doesn't matter if you don't like it, just think about it. So follow the great artists in terms of music and of course in art. How did the artist come up with the idea for her great work? Was she isolated? Was she having problems? And I think that again enables you to improvise, to move from one way of making a living to another. It's absolutely fascinating. And the other thing that's linked to this, which I don't think people really understand sometimes, is that sometimes the most important thing is constraints. If you're constrained by something like the coronavirus pandemic, that's when creativity comes out. That's when you see it. I mean, look on LinkedIn, look on YouTube, look on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, whatever social media platform you spend your time on. You will see that some people have thrived. They've gone from being, doing something like with me, professional speaker speaking on keynote stages all over the world, to being on YouTube and suddenly becoming film directors. Or you might have somebody who was a writer who's changed from writing to music, or and there's all sorts of things have happened because people haven't been able to make a living from what they were doing previously. They've also said that many of us have become writers during the pandemic, and that's pretty straightforward because we've got more time. But people are thinking, oh my goodness, I can see feel me reacting to this pandemic in a way I never expected, and they want to tell their story. So that's going on all round about you. I've also met people, and actually that person has often been in the mirror, I have to be honest, I don't always get this right, who have thought, well, oh God, I just had everything ready, I just had everything just so, like the porridge, and then along came this external force and it's destroyed it. And some people have not coped with that, and I understand that. I mean, people are suffering and people are, not doing well intellectually, not doing well mentally. People are getting depressed. So if, like many people, you're wondering what to do in 2021, you're wondering how to re-establish meaning in your life, how to start a new career perhaps, think about how you could improv your way into that. Think about new things you could do with the skills that you have. Think about new learning you could undertake. Think about new courses you could take. Think about new skills you could develop. Because I think that is the way out of this. And if you're running a corporate HR department or training department, don't let the big nasty accountants take away your training budget, because if you want your company to be creative, to be innovative, and to come out of the COVID pandemic bigger, better, stronger, more giving, more socially aware, again, I think learning and development is the way to go. The more your people know, the more likely they are to come up with new ideas, the more likely they are to riff, to improvise on your products and services to give your customers a better deal. And I think that I'm going to have to put this off because there's a big gang of dogs coming towards my little dog. Here! One of the dangers of coming into the forest sometimes is that you never know who you're going to bump into, and there must be, 10 look like working dogs over there. You won't be able to see them even if I turn the camera around, but there's a gaggle of dogs, and their little dog, who we just got a few months ago, is still very curious about other dogs, so I don't want him to run up to working dogs because they can be tough old boots, those dogs, and can be quite aggressive, and I'm afraid little Muffin here couldn't cope.